The stairwell smelled faintly of wet wool and old radiator heat as I climbed to the ground floor of my parents' triplex in Rosemont. My boots squeaked on the rubber mat, leaving streaks of slush behind. From inside, I heard the muffled cheer of a hockey commentator. Then the metallic clink of forks against porcelain. It was my mother's birthday. But the Habs game was playing louder than any music. I paused at the door, my breath fogging in the cold, one hand tightening around the paper bag I carried. Inside was a framed photo of Grandpapa and me, both of us covered in sawdust from the summer we built a birdhouse together. He'd called it Une maison pour les oiseaux et pour l'avenir, a home for the birds and for the future. Tonight, I wanted it to mean something more. The door opened before I knocked. My sister Camille leaned out, toque still on her head, cheeks flushed pink. "You're late," she whispered, but her eyes darted to the bag I held. She didn't smile. Inside, the living room was crowded with cousins and neighbors balancing plates of tortillere and maple fudge squares. My father, Mark, stood at the center, a glass of wine in hand, posture rigid. My mother, Aline, swept around the room in a sapphire blouse, laughing too loudly, the kind of laugh she saved for guests. "Maya," she said, her tone clipped but polite. "You made it." I kissed her cheek. Her perfume was sharp, expensive, heavy with vanilla and regret. I handed her the bag. "Happy birthday, Maman. I thought you'd like this." She didn't open it, only set it on the gift table beside a tower of wrapped boxes. My father's gaze followed it, then flicked back to me with something colder than disinterest. The hockey announcer's voice boomed from the TV, and it's a tie game. A few cousins cheered, but the sound fell flat under the weight of Mark's silence. He raised his glass slightly. "So," he said, "any announcements tonight?" The question wasn't innocent. It sat heavy in the air, loaded with years of arguments about my choices. My partner, my so-called wasted potential. Julian wasn't with me tonight. He was working another double shift at the bistro, but his absence was an accusation in itself. I swallowed, feeling every eye on me. My throat tightened, but I steadied my voice. "Julian and we're planning something big. Not just for us, for the family too." The room stilled. Forks paused mid-air. Camille's hand trembled against her wineglass. My mother's smile froze, polite mask slipping. My father's voice cut through like a skate blade on ice. "If you mean with him," he said, low but loud enough for all to hear, "don't expect a cent from this house. Not the triplex. Not the land. Rian, you choose that path. You choose it without us." The words hit harder than any slap. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I let the silence wrap around me. Let the sting of it sink in. My mother glanced at the cousins, embarrassment reddening her cheeks. Camille looked down, lips pressed tight, as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. I smiled faintly, not from amusement, but from the sharp clarity of knowing a line had just been drawn. The hockey horn blared from the TV, announcing another goal. No one cheered. The radiator rattled like cutlery in a drawer, spitting out a tired warmth that barely reached the windows. Our Lingale walk-up smelled of butter and garlic from the pasta Julian had made before his shift. Now it was just me. The sink full of bowls, and the hydro bill pinned under a salt shaker on the kitchen table. Outside, snow hissed against the glass like static. Somewhere on the street, a plow scraped by, metal on asphalt. A tired animal clearing the same path for the 10th time tonight. I slid the bill free, flattening its dog-eared corner. The total stared back, higher than last month. Higher than last year. I whispered a thin, voyons donc, and reached for a pen. Julian came in near midnight. Toque pushed back, hair damp from the kitchen. The bistro sent him home with a paper sack. He set it on the counter with ceremony. "Staff meal, chicken thighs with roasted parsnips," he said, voice low, reading my mood. Still warm. He kissed the top of my head, then the spot between my shoulder blades. My shoulders were knotted tight enough to chip a tooth on. I slid the bill toward him. He whistled softly. "Hydro decided we're funding a new dam? Or the building is leaking heat like a harmonica?" I said, "Either way, this month we're careful." Again, we ate standing at the counter, forks scraping cardboard. not talking for a minute. The chicken was savory and a little sweet. The parsnips nutty. The kitchen had tossed in 2 slices of baguette that tasted like a hug. Steam fogged the window over the sink. I stifled the urge to wipe a heart on the glass. Julian nodded at the notebook open on the table. You started the numbers? Not the scary ones. Yet. I flipped pages. Rent. Groceries. Transit passes. Phone. The hydro spike circled twice. My handwriting tightened with each line item. We can shave groceries by doing a big shop at the Marché and freezing. You bike. I metro. We cut streaming. I'll pick up an extra weekend event for the community center. He leaned beside me, reading the columns. And the down payment jar? A mason jar sat by the kettle. The one with loonies and toonies we fed like a stray cat. I shook it. It purred, but lightly. It pays for a door handle at best. I said, trying a smile. Julian laughed, then sobered. We don't have to do this now. We could wait out the market. Rent another year. Save slow. Pas de panique. I looked past him to the living room. Shelves bowing with second-hand books. A couch we found on Marketplace. The framed birdhouse photo I'd meant to give Maman but couldn't. Grandpapa's hand on my shoulder. Sawdust like snow across our arms. We said we'd start. I said, not tomorrow, now. A real home. Something that's ours. He nodded. D'accord. Then we plan like grown-ups. We brought the laptop to the table. It's fan-wheezed as if the spreadsheet itself were a workout. I typed real numbers across the top and we listed out the boring, unglamorous costs of being 2 people stubborn enough to stay in the city we loved. Rent. Utilities. Groceries. STM. Prescriptions. Winter tires. Surprise dentist. Someone's birthday potluck, because love often looked like showing up with pâté chinois and not leaving early. Julian added a tab. Bistro plan. I'm not dreaming big, he said, preempting a fight neither of us wanted. A small room. 12 tables. Soup that makes you call your mother. We pop up first. Borrow a commissary kitchen in Verdun on Mondays when they're closed. We track real revenue, not fantasy. I looked up. Mondays you're dead on your feet. He shrugged. I'm dead anyway. Might as well be building something. His phone buzzed with a late text from his chef. Tomorrow's delivery arriving early. He thumbed back a reply. Then set the phone face down. The small act, his attention folding back toward me, felt like a blanket. Okay, I said. Say we match your pop-up line by line. If we can show 3 solid months. I pitched the center on a food and culture night. Vendors, live music, donation jars for the shelter. We take a tiny fee. You get exposure that isn't just Instagram noise. He grinned. You turn chaos into calm. C'est ton superpouvoir. I snorted. No. My superpower is pretending to know what I'm doing. The radiator clanged once, loud enough to make us jump. I rubbed my arms, feeling the thinness of heat. The thinness of everything. The spreadsheet cursor blinked like a heartbeat in the quiet. Julian, I said, as lightly as I could manage. Did Grandpapa ever talk to you about the triplex? About plans? Only that he built it 1 floor at a time. Julian said, and that he used to patch drywall with stories. I traced a line on the table with my fingernail. He told me something once. Quand la famille grandit, la maison grandit avec elle. When the family grows, the house grows with it. It sounded like one of his sayings. But what if? You think there's something written? Not a will, I said quickly. A clause. Something through a notaire. Formal enough to be real. Soft enough to be family. He considered that, turning his fork in his fingers. Outside, the plow growled past again. From a neighbor's open window came a faint radio jingle and the smell of toast. Late night snack or early morning shift. Hard to tell in this city. If there is, he said, your parents would know. They would, I said. The words landed heavy and stayed there. My phone screen lit the table. STM alert. Service slowed by weather. Below it, a photo from Camille, our mother at her party. Caught mid-laugh. A blur of light and glass. The caption read, Tu as oublié ka. She'd photographed the paper bag with the frame I didn't give. I typed back, Garde-la pour moi? She answered with a single thumbs up. Then after a long pause, tout va bien? My thumbs hovered. The hum under her question wasn't small talk. Camille had clocked the shift in the room. She'd heard the sentence you don't say out loud in families unless you mean to salt the earth. I changed apps. Pulled up my email. The cursor blinked in a blank subject line while I searched for a name I hadn't typed since the funeral. Bouchard. Notaire. The address auto-populated like a ghost stepping into the room. Subject. Question concerned la donation partage de M. Léon Leclerc. I typed 3 lines. Deleted 2. Retyped 1. The words felt like stepping onto ice I hoped was thick. Send it, Julian said, reading my face rather than the screen. Worst case. He says no. Worst case. I said. He says yes, then everything changes. We sat with that for a moment, listening to the thin clatter of pipes and the quiet city doing its winter chores. He reached for my hand. His palm was warm, nicked with small kitchen cuts. Life and risk marked right there in the skin. He squeezed once. If there's a line between us and a home, we cross it together. I breathed in, out, tasted garlic and cold air and something like resolve. I hit send. The laptop fan wound down. A tiny exhale. The apartment felt smaller, but in a way that made sense, like we were 2 people inside a plan. Not just weather. My phone buzzed again. Camille. Appelle-moi demain. Pas devant you. I switched off the kitchen light. In the dark, the birdhouse photo glowed faintly, catching streetlight. Grandpapa's hand rested on my shoulder forever. And for once it didn't feel like memory. It felt like permission. The next morning, Montreal wore its usual winter mask. Pale sun. Brittle wind. Sidewalks patched with last night's salt. I took the metro into the city. Boots squeaking on the damp tiles at Barry UQAM. Commuters stood silent, scarves over their mouths, coffee cups steaming. The train's doors sighed open with a tired chime. And I let the current of bodies push me out into the cold. I hadn't told Julian where I was headed. He'd left early for prep at the bistro, still humming about parsnips. My email to Notaire Bouchard had been short, clumsy, almost childlike, but he'd replied within 2 minutes. Passes me voir demain maiden. Discretion assurée. Come by tomorrow morning. Discretion assured. His office sat above a dépanneur on a side street in the plateau. The kind of place where the doorbell jingled, the fridges hummed, and the air smelled of stale cigarettes mixed with coffee grounds. I stopped in for gum, partly to buy time. The cashier, a man with a Habs cap pulled low, nodded without looking up from his tabloid. Headline. Record Freud Prévu, Hydro sous pression. Another warning about the grid. Upstairs, Bouchard's office door was half open, revealing a room lined with shelves of blue binders. The notaire himself, tall, thinning hair, glasses perched low, rose when I entered. His handshake was dry, firm, but his eyes softened when I said my name. Votre grand-père parlait toujours de vous. He said, your grandfather always spoke of you. I sat across from his desk, fingers twisting in my mittens. He used to say the house was for the family who grows. Did he ever write that down? Bouchard folded his hands. There are things I can't disclose without formal authorization. But, he paused, glancing at a shelf, then back to me. In Quebec, we sometimes use a donation partage. It's a registered arrangement, property shared ahead of time, usually to keep families from tearing apart later. If such a document exists, you'd have the right to request a certified copy. The words settled in my chest like a puzzle piece sliding into place. He didn't say it existed, but he didn't deny it either. I leaned forward. And if conditions are tied to starting a family? His eyebrows lifted. Then those conditions must be respected. It isn't about money. It's about continuity. He tapped his desk. A soft rhythm. But you'll need more than curiosity. A written request. Proof of your connection. Perhaps, the courage to face what comes out. I nodded. Throat tight. My phone buzzed. A text from Camille. Call me later. Not at home. The words were clipped. Careful. Like she was speaking in code. Bouchard leaned back. Voice softer. Maya, you should know, your parents are within their rights to manage the property. But if they've deviated from the clause. He let the silence finish the sentence. Outside, the bells of a nearby church struck 11. The sound echoed down the street, muffled by snow and time. I thanked him, stood, and slipped out. On the stairwell landing, I pulled my phone close to my chest and reread Camille's message. Not at home, not in front of them. For years she'd been the one nodding along, never contradicting, always smoothing things over. Now she was drawing a line in invisible ink. The dépanneur bell jingled as I stepped back inside for warmth. The Habs Cap cashier was still flipping pages. I bought another coffee I didn't need. My hands trembled, spilling cream onto the plastic lid. For the first time, the triplex didn't feel like a house anymore. It felt like a file folder waiting to be opened. Pages heavy with secrets. By late afternoon the storm rolled in. A heavy wall of white swallowing Montreal whole. The STM app buzzed with delays. Buses idling at curbs like stranded beasts. I pulled my scarf tighter, trudging down Rachel Street where streetlights already glowed faint amber against the snow. Every exhale hung in the air like a speech I wasn't ready to give. The triplex loomed ahead, windows glowing, wreath half buried in drifts. I had meant to come by next week. Maybe never, but Camille's text, "Come now, before it's too late," left no room for hesitation. Inside, wet boots crowded the front hall. A muddle of salt stains and melting ice. The smell of tortillere reheated filled the narrow stairwell, layered with something sharper. Tension. Like wires pulled too tight. In the living room, my parents sat opposite each other at the table. Hockey commentary humming from the muted TV. Mark's jaw was clenched, his fingers tapping a rhythm against a half-empty glass. Aline fiddled with a string of pearls. Laughter long gone from her mouth. Camille hovered by the window, phone in hand, glancing outside as though waiting for rescue. I slipped out of my coat. Snow melting down my sleeve. Storm's brutal, I said, my voice small. Mark didn't look up. You shouldn't have come. Camille's eyes flicked to mine, relief. Guilt. Both. I sat, feeling the radiator's weak heat against my calves. The silence stretched until it snapped. Maya, Aline said, voice low but sharp. Why involve Bouchard? Her pearls clicked like beads on a rosary. I steadied my breath. Because Grandpapa meant for this house to grow with us. He didn't want secrecy. Mark finally lifted his gaze, eyes dark as the storm outside. You think you understand responsibility? You think a clause on paper replaces years of sacrifice? He leaned forward, knuckles white. That burst pipe last winter, $8,000. The second floor vacancy? 4 months rent gone. And hydro raising rates while this place bleeds heat. We're drowning. Maya. And you. His voice cracked but he pressed on. You come asking for keys we can't afford to hand over. The room pulsed with his confession. Not malice. Fear. I gripped the edge of the chair, grounding myself. Why not tell me? Why hide it? You could have asked for help. Help, he barked. From you? From that cook you drag around? Julian's name left unsaid but heavy in the room. Camille stepped forward then, voice thin. Papa, enough. She has a right to know. His glare pinned her in place. But she didn't retreat. Snow battered the window behind her. Wind howling like a crowd outside a locked arena. I wanted to scream, to throw their secrets back at them. But instead my voice came quiet. Deliberate. You keep talking about sacrifice. But sacrifice without honesty, it's just theft in slow motion. Aline's hand trembled, pearls slipping against her palm. For a moment I saw it, not power, but shame. She had known all along. The TV commentator broke the silence with a cheer. Goal scored somewhere far away. Nobody moved. I rose, pulling the envelope from my bag, sliding it onto the table. The craft paper looked plain against the dark wood, but it carried weight. Bouchard explained what's at stake. I said softly, if you won't open the door, the law will. Mark's face hardened. You'd drag us into court? I'd rather not, I said, but I won't let silence bury Grandpapa's promise. Snow rattled the windows, wind groaning through the old wood frames. Camille's phone buzzed on the sill. She glanced at it, then at me, eyes wide with something like courage. No one spoke. The storm outside howled louder, as though the house itself braced for what was coming. The storm outside raged on. snow piling high against the steps. As if even the city wanted to trap us inside until every secret spilled. The living room smelled faintly of scorched pastry and cheap wine, though the real taste in my mouth was metallic, dread, sharpened into resolve. The envelope sat between us on the table. Craft paper, plain, edges softened from being handled too many times in my bag. It wasn't elegant like a velvet box, it wasn't meant to be. It was blunt, ordinary, like truth itself. Mark stared at it as though it might detonate. Aline's fingers worried her pearls. Faster now, beads clicking in staccato rhythm with the storm's rattle at the windows. Finally, she broke the silence. What's inside? I swallowed. A demand draft from Bouchard. And a note, from me. A reminder that Grandpapa's words weren't decoration. They were intent. Camille's phone vibrated again on the sill. She hesitated, then unlocked it with a quick glance toward our parents. Her thumb hovered, her face pale but determined. Maya, she whispered, holding out the screen. It was a forwarded email. Mark's name in the header. Subject line bold. Disclosure of donation partage. My eyes darted over the text. Stall her request. We can't let her see the clause until we've covered the mortgage. Say the file's mislaid. I'll buy us time. The room contracted, every wall pressing closer. Camille, what are you doing? Mark's voice shook, low and dangerous. Her hands trembled but she didn't lower the phone. I'm tired of being the one who stays quiet. She deserves to know. For the first time, Aline's pearls slipped, scattering a bead onto the floor. The tiny sphere rolled under the radiator. Lost, she gasped, not at the bead, but at the truth unraveling in front of her. I pushed the envelope toward them. This isn't a threat, it's clarity. If you won't open the file, I will. And Camille's proof, it only confirms what I suspected. Mark slammed his palm against the table, rattling the glassware. You think dragging family business through a notaire's office makes you strong? It makes you a traitor. The word traitor landed heavy. But I didn't flinch. I had rehearsed this moment in silence, waiting for it to cut. Instead, it clarified. You hid debt. You twisted Grandpapa's legacy into your shield. I said, my voice steady. You don't get to call me traitor when all I've done is refuse to be lied to. Camille stepped closer, phone still glowing like a torch in her hand. Papa, stop. It's over. Aline's eyes darted between us. Stormlight catching in the glass. For once, her voice cracked. We wanted to fix it before you saw. We didn't want you to think less of us. The storm roared outside, snow against glass, as if punctuating every word. I stood, sliding my chair back slowly, and placed a second folded slip atop the envelope, my own handwriting looping across lined paper. Grandpapa wrote the house was for the family who grows. I said, you chose to shrink it into fear. This letter, this is me choosing not to shrink with you. The words hung in the air, heavier than any blizzard. Mark's face flushed. Aline's hand froze mid-air, and Camille finally exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for years. The TV flickered, commentator's voice breaking through again with forced cheer, and Montreal takes the lead. None of us moved. The real game was here, and the score had just changed. The storm finally eased overnight, leaving the streets glazed in ice and the triplex wrapped in a muffled silence. By morning, plows had carved trenches through the drifts, and Montreal's skyline looked scrubbed clean. But inside me, nothing felt clear. Camille's message had arrived at dawn. Il faut que tu viennes. Chez Bouchard, 2 p.m. Don't let them go alone. I dressed carefully, layering wool under my coat. Boots laced tight. My reflection in the metro window looked foreign, tired eyes. Jaw set. A woman who no longer belonged in her parents' narrative. The office smelled faintly of paper dust and lemon polish. The radiator ticked in the corner, fighting the cold. Binders lined every wall, each spine stamped with dates and names, quiet lives stacked in order. We sat around a long oak table. Mark, shoulders rigid, chin tilted like he could stare down the entire legal code. Aline, pearls back around her neck though one bead was missing. The gap a silent reminder. Camille, pale but upright, a folder of printed emails clutched like armor. And me, Hands folded tight in my lap. Notebook ready but blank. Bouchard entered last, closing the door with a click that felt ceremonial. He adjusted his glasses, set a slim file before him, and looked each of us in the eye. Merci d'être Venus. Today, we will address the matter of Monsieur Léon Leclerc's donation partage. This is not a courtroom. It is a table for clarity. Mark scoffed. Clarity? We've managed this house for years without your interference. Bouchard's voice was calm, steady, and yet here you are. He opened the file, papers whispering. In 2002, Monsieur Leclerc executed a donation partage regarding the triplex. His wish, that equity be divided among his descendants once a new family unit was established. This clause, he tapped the page, was not symbolic. It is binding. Aline shifted, pearls clicking. We never hid that. We only postponed. Camille cleared her throat. Her voice trembled, but the words cut clean. You told the building manager to stall disclosure. She slid her phone across the table. Email glowing. I have proof. Mark's hand shot out, but Bouchard raised a palm. Let her finish. Camille's jaw set. I won't be silent anymore. The air in the room thickened. Snowlight filtering through lace curtains. Bouchard leaned forward. Postponement without consent is deviation. A second mortgage, he looked at Mark, secured against the property. Without informing all beneficiaries, breaches the spirit of the arrangement. Mark's fist clenched, knuckles whitening. We had no choice. Repairs, hydro, taxes, this city eats you alive. True, Bouchard said gently, but desperation does not erase obligation. The clause remains. Maya is entitled to a share. I found my voice. Quiet but steady. I don't want ruin. I want recognition. A plan that honors him, and us. For the first time, Aline's mask cracked. Her shoulders sagged, pearls slipping askew. We were ashamed. We thought, if we could fix it before you knew, we could protect the image he left. Silence spread. The radiator hissed. Paper rustled faintly as Bouchard turned another page. There are remedies, he said. A structured restitution. Partial transfer of title. Mediation. Not litigation. But it requires honesty, today. Mark's eyes burned, but words failed him. Aline wept quietly, one hand covering her mouth. Camille reached across the table. Not toward them, but toward me, fingers brushing mine. Fragile yet firm. For the first time in months. Maybe years, I didn't feel alone. By March, Montreal loosened its shoulders. Snowbanks shrank into dirty ridges. The streets slick with meltwater. The STM buses hissed through puddles. And every passerby carried the same look, half relief, half exhaustion. Spring was always late here. But when it arrived, even a glimpse felt like grace. I sat by the window of our Lingale apartment. Mug of tea cooling between my palms. The birdhouse photo leaned on the sill. Sunlight slanting across it. Sawdust in Grandpapa's beard. His smile wide and unguarded. The image no longer stung, it steadied me. Julian chopped carrots in the kitchen. The scrape of knife against board rhythmic. He hummed a tune from last night's bistro shift. Half a lullaby, half a joke. I should have felt peace. Instead, the folder from Bouchard sat on the table, heavy with signatures and stipulations. Julian wiped his hands, came to sit across from me. So, it's done? He asked. I nodded. Almost. They'll transfer part of the title this spring. Restitution schedule too. Bouchard made sure it's enforceable. His brows knit. And you're okay with that? Not dragging them through court? I stared into my tea. Steam fogging my glasses. Justice and revenge aren't the same. I don't want to bury them. I just want to stop being buried under them. He reached for my hand. The cuts on his palm were healing. Faint pink lines. That sounds like you. Fierce. But fair. I smiled, though faintly. Sometimes I wish I were crueler. It would be simpler. Camille's visit. That evening, Camille arrived, cheeks flushed from the metro. Hair damp from drizzle. She carried a small box. Found this in storage, she said, setting it down. Inside was the actual birdhouse, paint chipped. Roof warped, but still intact. Grandpapa's handwriting carved on the base. Poor Maya. Que ton nid grandis toujours. I traced the letters. Throat tight. You kept it? Camille shrugged, her eyes glistening. I couldn't throw it away. I guess. I was waiting for you to need it. The unspoken words hovered. I'm sorry. I chose wrong before. I closed the box gently. You did need it too. You just didn't know how to ask. She exhaled, shoulders slumping. A release years overdue. Days later, I rode the STM bus downtown. The city thawing outside. A puddle splashed against the window. Kids in bright jackets chasing each other along the sidewalk. My reflection in the glass didn't look foreign anymore. It looked like someone carrying both loss and beginning. The restitution agreement was tucked in my bag. It wasn't wealth, it was recognition. A partial title, a structured repayment, small, imperfect, but real, enough to anchor us, enough to stop the lies from festering. As the bus crossed the Jacques Cartier Bridge, sunlight broke through the clouds, glinting off meltwater like shattered glass. For the first time in months, my breath felt light. That night, Julian and I stood outside the triplex. Snow still clung to the gutters, but icicles dripped steadily, one drop at a time. I could have burned it all, I said quietly, dragged them through court, taken more. He slipped his arm around me. And then you'd spend years fighting ghosts. You chose to build instead. I looked up at the windows glowing softly. Shadows moved inside, my parents. Smaller than I remembered, bound not by control but by consequence. Grandpapa said the house grows with the family. I murmured, maybe growth isn't walls or equity. Maybe it's choosing not to shrink. Even when you could. Julian kissed the top of my head. His breath warm in the cool air. Then we're already richer than they know. The birdhouse rested in my hands. Paint flaking under my fingers. Tomorrow I'd hang it on our balcony. A small home for strangers with wings. For now, it was enough to hold. The city dripped and thawed around us. Ice surrendering to water. And in that fragile sound, I felt the future crack open. Bouchard slid the file forward. Signatures will not erase wounds. But they will prevent new ones. This is the path. The storm had passed, but the air inside that room still felt electric. Like the moment just before ice begins to thaw. The first warm Saturday of April carried a kind of optimism only Canadians understood. Snow finally retreating into gutters. Children on bikes weaving through puddles. Neighbors peeling off layers of coats like shedding old skins. The community center in Lingale smelled of simmering spices and baked dough. The air heavy with stories folded into food. Tables lined the hall. Pierogies steaming beside Jamaican patties. Bongoon resting under damp cloth. Tortillere slices next to a crock of maple beans. Voices rose in English, French, and everything in between. It was a potluck, but also a quiet declaration. We belong. Together. I carried in a tray of Julian's soup aux legumes. Still fragrant from our tiny kitchen. He followed, balancing a basket of fresh baguettes. Flour dusted on his cheek like paint. His eyes met mine, and the room felt lighter. The toast. We settled at a table near the window, where spring sun spilled across mismatched plates. Camille slipped in late. A small container of samosas from a friend's family in Park X. She set them down wordlessly. But when she looked at me, her eyes held something different, not guilt this time, but humility. Halfway through the meal, she tapped her glass with a fork. The chatter softened. I want to say something. She began, switching easily between French and English. As she always did when nervous. Family isn't easy. Ours, especially not. But tonight, I see what Grandpapa meant. A house isn't walls. It's people who keep showing up. Alors, merci et ma sœur. Merci d'avoir eu le courage que je n'avais pas. Applause rippled gently. I squeezed her hand under the table. The words were imperfect, but they were hers. My quiet reveal. When the room grew loud again, kids laughing, chairs scraping, I leaned close to Julian. Maybe tonight's the night, I whispered. He raised an eyebrow. You sure? I nodded. It's not just ours anymore. It's part of something bigger. We stood together. I didn't need a microphone. We wanted to share one more dish. I said, voice carrying just enough. It's not on the table yet, because it's still cooking. In 9 months. Give or take. Laughter. Gasps. Congratulations in 2 languages. Someone shouted, felicitations. A neighbor hugged me. Another patted Julian's shoulder. The warmth spread faster than the spring sun. The gift returned. Later, when the trays emptied and children dozed on folded jackets, Aline appeared at the doorway. She looked smaller somehow, her blue coat hanging loose. Mark hovered behind her, hands buried deep in his pockets. Silence his only language tonight. She approached carefully, carrying something wrapped in newspaper. When she unfolded it, the birdhouse emerged, newly painted. Bright teal with a yellow roof. The carved words still visible. Pour Maya, que ton nid grandis toujours. Her eyes shone, not with power but with plea. It should be yours, she whispered. I took it, fingers brushing the fresh paint. My chest tightened. Merci, maman. The words felt both heavy and light. Closing image. At dusk, we stepped outside. The air smelled of thawing earth. Car tires hissing on wet streets. Julian carried the tray. Camille walked beside me, and I held the birdhouse close. On the center's porch, someone strung fairy lights that blinked against the fading sky. Children chased each other across the lot, their laughter mixing with the evening's chorus of languages. Julian squeezed my hand. Camille lifted her glass again, this time only toward us. À la famille qui pousse, she said softly, to the family that grows. And I knew then, growth wasn't about equity papers or restitution schedules. It was in soup ladled into mismatched bowls. In apologies spoken too late but spoken still. In spring water dripping steady from the eaves. Spring had come slow, but it had come. Family isn't always the warm embrace we hope it to be. Sometimes it's complicated, layered with silence, old debts, and expectations that cut deeper than words. Maya's story reminds us that love without honesty becomes control, and sacrifice without transparency becomes theft. Her choice to stand firm, not with vengeance but with clarity, shows the strength in setting boundaries, something many Canadians know too well. Especially in a country where generations often live under one roof, balancing tradition with change. But it also speaks to resilience. We live in a time when housing prices, hydro bills, and the weight of family expectations can feel overwhelming. Yet even in those storms, there's space for integrity, for standing up and saying, this is my life. This is my future. True growth doesn't always come from tearing down walls. Sometimes it's about building new ones, birdhouses, potlucks, shared laughter, that carry us forward into spring. If you faced moments where you had to choose between peace and self-respect, I'd love to hear your perspective. Share your own story in the comments below. You never know, your words might be the reminder someone else needs tonight. Wishing you warmth through the thaw, courage in the storms, and the gentle reminder that healing, like spring in Canada, may come slowly, but it always comes.